Hey everyone, Sheldon here, and in this video I'm going to be showing you guys how to make a magazine out of paper for the paper M1911. So the one I have in here right now is a real magazine, but I'm going to show you guys how to make one out of paper because I know not everyone has access to a real one like this. So if you have a real one or you make a paper one, you can make this entire project. And I figured I'd make this video now because when I eventually make a tutorial on this entire project, I can refer you guys back to how to make the magazine first. And if you have an M1911 magazine in the first place, whether it's a real one or one that you made, it kind of works as the backbone for this entire project. So you kind of use it to shape the entire gun, and it just makes it so much easier if you have that first because everything just kind of forms around it. So I'm just going to show you guys what we're going to do. Basically, I printed this off the internet, and it's obviously not to scale because this is really tiny, but if I zoom in a little bit, all the dimensions are still really small. But my point is, I just focused on a couple dimensions like this one right here, which is from here to here, not where this overhang is. And then I looked at this dimension right here, which is basically the width of the magazine, so from here to here. And then this one up here, which just basically tells me the thickness of the walls. So those were only the necessary measurements I needed to start making this magazine. So these measurements are showing the outside of the magazine, but the way we're going to be building it is by building sort of a shape that looks like this and wrapping paper around it to get the right dimensions to form the outside shape. So basically what I did was took the measurement of the thickness of the walls going all around it and then multiplied it by 2 and then subtracted it from these outside measurements. So if you look at the magazine here, you can imagine that this outside measurement would be bigger than the inside measurement because these walls have thickness to them. So basically what I did was measured from here to here and also from here to here, and then subtracted the thickness of the walls accordingly. And remember, I had to double the thickness because there's a wall on each side. And by doing that, I was able to make this. So all these measurements you see here are going to form the inner core that we're going to wrap paper around to form the actual shell of the magazine. So all the yellow ones here are inches, and I also put millimeters on there for convenience. So this is the piece we're going to make right now. Basically, we're just going to stack this shape up and have the layers go in that direction. And this is normally something I would build out of cereal box cardboard because it's a little bit faster to build with that. It's thicker, less layers, and this isn't a structural piece, so it doesn't need to be like super strong. But I'm completely out of cereal box cardboard, so I'm just going to stack this up using paper. So all I'm going to do is just take a sheet of paper and fold it this direction. And you guys have seen this process before. Basically, I'm just going to put some glue on this half of the paper, and I'm not going to use the white glue and the wood glue mix to make this base shape because it's not really necessary. Just spreading the glue on here, trying to get it as even as possible. And then I'm just going to fold this over, try to match up these corners. And start running all the excess air and glue out. And now I'm just going to fold it in this direction again, and it's just going to be a long 4-layer piece, and we're just going to make several of these. So I'm just going to do the same thing and just glue this together. And now I'm just going to take my ruler here and mark the middle so we can glue these two 4-layer pieces together and get an 8-layer piece. So just lining up the ruler. This doesn't have to be perfect at all. Yeah, there you go. Now I'm just going to take these and glue them together using the same principle. So this piece is 8 layers thick now, and as you can see, if I bring the template over here, this piece is actually longer than the drawing I have on here, which is good. That means I'll have a little bit of excess wiggle room to work with. And now I'm just going to make a bunch more of these, and then I'll show you guys what I have in mind after that. Okay, so now I have 15 8-layer pieces. So I actually let them dry for a little bit. They're still semi-wet, but it's a perfect time for cutting. So with all of these individually, I'm just going to take my calipers and measure over 1.320 to get that width, which you can see here, 1.320 or 33.52 millimeters. So I have this one right here, and I'm just going to measure over 1.320 just from the edge. Put one at the top and also the bottom. And I'm going to draw a line on here just so you guys can see what I'm talking about a little bit. Normally I wouldn't draw a line, I would just cut, and match up those 2 points, but with a line drawn on here, it's a little bit easier to visualize. And now I'm just going to cut straight through this line. And there it is after cutting it. So it's the right width now, and this piece I can use for other projects later in the future, which is pretty cool. But if I bring this over here, you can see the width matches up. So I just need to do this same process to the other 14 pieces. Okay, so here they are, all cut out. And it turns out I only needed 14 pieces, so I have an extra one over here. I mean, it's better to have a little more to work with than too little. So now I'm just going to start gluing these together, and I'm just going to use normal Elmer's glue because this isn't really a structural component like I said, so it doesn't need to be like overly strong. Alright, so I'm just going to finish gluing all these pieces together, and then I'm just going to let it dry underneath a couple textbooks overnight, and then I'll show you guys what we're going to do next after it's dry. Alright, so this is what the piece looks like after all the layers are stacked and glued together. So I did let it sit underneath several textbooks for 24 hours, and it looks pretty good. And I did a couple basic things off camera, stuff that you guys are familiar with. I just took some super glue and put it all around the outside edge. And then I took some pliers or vice grips and just compressed the layers together all around it. And I did also take some sandpaper and just sand the long faces on this piece. So that was just to get the dimensions correct, because there were a couple layers that were higher and lower. It looked more like this over here, which I'm not worrying about that edge at all because I just need to slide a piece off of here. So as long as it can slide off, it should be good. So now what we need to do is just round off one of these long edges. So it could be this one or this one, it doesn't really matter. And as you can see, this lines up with the template just like that, and also like that. Alright, so now we just need to start working on this rounded shape, which is going to look something like this in the 3-dimensional space. So basically all I did was just take this number and subtract the radius of this circle right here, which gave me 1.076 inches or 27.33 millimeters. And I totally forgot to put this dimension on here. That's why it's on there in pencil right now. But basically I have my calipers locked open to this dimension 1.076, and I'm just going to measure over from one of these walls. I'll just do this one and make a mark there and a mark there, just like this. Trying to get it as accurate as possible. And now I'm just going to connect these 2 points with a line. I'm just going to use a ruler and line them up and draw the line on there. I'm also going to draw a line just like this, same distance away from the bottom here on this side. So it'll be up here, and that'll just make it easier to get that rounded shape symmetrical. So now there's a line on both sides, as you can see, and I'm also just going to draw one straight through the center of this long side right here. Okay, so now we have all the information we need. We have a line here, here, and here. So now it's just going to be a matter of rounding off this entire side right here, and we're going to use these lines as reference. This line right here will be where the radius starts, and then it'll just arc up to right there, and that'll be the highest part of the radius, and then it will just continue down and match up to where that line is. So now I'm just going to start rounding it off using an X-Acto knife, and I'm going to be careful and take my time with it because it can be easy to remove too much material, and I don't really like to do patchwork all that much. Alright, so it's coming together. As you can see, it's really rough. Basically, I'm just gonna keep carving it and show you guys what it looks like after it's done. And this is what the piece looks like after rounding it off on this side completely. It's the only side that needs to be rounded off. So I did go over it with some sandpaper. You can see it's pretty shiny right there. It's not perfect, but it doesn't have to be. It's just a base for the magazine. And I went around the whole thing and measured it, and it all checks out with what the template says. So as long as the sides are smooth and the paper we wrap around can slide off without like sticking to this piece, then we should be good. And last night, I actually made this really bad mock-up version of the magazine just to test out the method I was going to show you guys. You can see it fits over this piece like that, and it also fits in the actual M1911. It's a little tight because it needs some sanding, but it does lock into place, and you can see it in there. Surprisingly, it matches up pretty well for a really poorly made mock-up version. So I'm going to show you guys how to make an actual good one that doesn't have the wrong angles and stuff. So the first thing we need to do is take the base and then a pretty wide strip of paper. This is 5 inches wide. And then we're just going to take this strip and just wrap it around here until this part just kind of barely covers this part, maybe like 1/4 of an inch or a little longer. And you can use just Elmer's glue for that part. And I'm just kind of going to mark a general mark on here. So I can just cut this strip a little shorter, just to the point that that kind of barely overlaps the layer beneath it. Then I'm just gonna cut this strip to those lines I just marked on there. So now the strip of paper is a little shorter. So what I'm doing is just kind of bringing this edge over to the center and then bringing this edge over and just making a little crease right there. So this whole thing will be bent back backwards. So there's the crease right there. Just gonna make it the same going all the way across. So from this crease over to the outside edge, that's where we're going to be applying glue. So this is just to get the first layer of the magazine started, and then after gluing this down, we're just going to use super glue for the rest of the magazine. So I'm just putting glue on that little section of the paper. I have a little excess there, that's fine. I just need to make sure this whole thing wraps around here tightly. And if I move quick enough, this glue shouldn't stick to this base surface. This is probably the hardest part. It's just making sure it's tight. You also really want to make sure that these corners are pretty sharp. I mean, I did round the corners on the base a little bit to make it more accurate to the actual shape of the magazine, but you know, just make sure it's all really tightly fit around this piece. And the piece still moves, so that's really good. If it gets stuck to the surface, you're just gonna have to cut it off and start over. And I've got this full sheet of paper here. Basically, I'm just folding it in half and then cutting 1 inch wide strips off of here. And now I'm just taking these that are folded over and just cutting it right at the seam here. And a lot of people ask me why I build stuff using small strips of paper like this, like on my tutorial for the cylinders video. It's just because if you use a really wide strip, the glue will just dry on one side before the other, and it's really hard to keep up with it or be fast enough. So we have all our strips here, and for a piece like this, it's very important to start the strip right where this other seam ended. That's the mistake I made with the mock-up version, and it didn't make anything even at all. The walls are kind of messed up. So just using super glue, and I'm just going to work my way around here. And since all these strips are starting where the previous one ended off, you won't have any layers that are thicker than others, because you know, it can overlap in the wrong spot or overlap twice, and then your piece is thicker on one side and thinner on the other. So that's what one strip looks like wrapped around there. So I'm just gonna basically put another one on here and just wrap it around and keep doing that until I get to the bottom. All right, so I added strips going from one side to the other, and it's not quite the right thickness yet. It needs to be 0.541 wide, and it's a little bit over 0.5. So now I'm just gonna take more strips and just keep going over it, but I'm going to cover the seams with a new strip. So all I did was crease this paper so I kind of have a midline, and I'm just going to line that up and match it up with the seam right there, and then just wrap it around with super glue again. So I'm just going to keep adding strips over these seams here and just, you know, follow the original seam and just keep going like that. And this piece still moves, so just make sure you keep checking that. So this is what it looks like after adding strips again. So it only took, you know, 2 passes of this length of a strip, which is half the length of a sheet of paper, so 5.5 inches, just wrapping this around once and then wrapping it around another time, but covering the seams. And that's actually not too bad. I thought I was going to have to add more of these strips of paper, but luckily the glue adds a little bit of thickness to it. So I can take this out, and it looks pretty good. It feels pretty solid. and you can hear the difference between Elmer's glue and super glue if I drop it on here. So this is Elmer's, and then this is super glue. A little different, and I guess this is technically Elmer's super glue, but you guys know what I mean. And you can also see that it fits in here pretty well. It's still a little rough, but the basic dimensions fit properly. Like, it doesn't really wiggle or anything, so that's super nice. Basically, I'm just gonna sand it down a little bit, smooth it out to where it can fit in there better. So I'm just gonna clean this up a little bit off camera, and then we can actually take the template shape like this and trace those lines on there and actually get the shape of the magazine. So this is what it looks like after cleaning it up a little bit. Just took some high grit sandpaper and made it as smooth as I can for now. And I'm just going to cut around those lines I just traced on there using the template. So I drew them on both sides just to make everything match up properly. And also remember that this line kind of transitions over here to this side. It's easy to mess that up, so just keep looking at the blueprint or some pictures of some magazines and just, you know, take it slow. So here it is, just generally cut out, except for that bottom part. I want to actually make the base plate before I cut that out, just to make sure it's the right size. But you have to make these two little cuts right there that makes this part actually able to bend over, so we can shape that into the feed lips. So to bend these feed lips into place, what I'm going to do is just take some super glue and just put it on the edge and probably on the inside and outside, and then just take some pliers like this and just keep tinkering with it, you know, by bending it until it ends up being the right shape. You guys will see what I mean afterwards. Okay, so now those are bent down like they should be, and it seems to fit around pretty well. If I take this and just kind of put it in here and try to hold it upside down, you can see it doesn't want to come out. Here's what it looks like up close. So it fits in there really nicely. I also went ahead and cut that notch out for the magazine release. Same technique, I just kind of cut lightly with the X-Acto knife and just poked through. But you can see it actually fits in here, and if you look inside, you can see the feed lips right there for the magazine. And you can see that rectangular piece on the bottom of the breech that actually fits between this gap of the feed lips. So just like that, and that's how the cartridge gets stripped off the magazine. So everything functions still like it should, so that's good. And the magazine doesn't want to come out because it's locked in place with the magazine release. So now we're just going to finish up the magazine by making some more components for it to make it actually finished. Okay, so now I'm just working on the base plate for the magazine, so that'll go right here in the bottom. Basically, I have an 8-layer piece here and another 8-layer piece, but it's cut into sections. I just took the template and just traced it out on my computer screen, basically got it to the right percentage and then traced it out, and this is just how I happen to be building it. And I also made these pretty small cylinders here, so I just wrapped a small band of paper around a 16 gauge wire, and I made 4 of these in total. They probably took like 1 minute each to make, and of course I used super glue for such a small part like that. So basically, I'm just going to take these 8-layer pieces and line them up accordingly to the bottom 8-layer piece. And it'll look better than this, but then these small little cylinders will go in these little gaps that you see on the sides. So something like that. So I'm just going to glue the front section on here first. There is no particular order that you have to do it in. Now I'm doing the back side. This one could be a little tricky. And then the last piece. Alright, so now all those pieces are on there. The next thing I'm going to do is take these small cylinders and just glue them in place and just make sure they're all lined up. Wow, this is tedious. So now I have all 4 of those cylinders glued on there, and I use this 1/16 inch drill to make sure they're lined up, which they are, so that's good. So I highly recommend taking some super glue and putting it around the cylinders and filling it up with some baking soda. It'll just make it stronger and also look better. So this is going to fit in the bottom of the magazine, somewhere around here. I still have to trim a little bit off this piece to get it to fit past that curved shape right there. But before all that, I'm just working on finishing it off and making it stronger just by taking super glue and putting it in that fillet area and then sprinkling some baking soda over it. And I'm doing it with my left hand so you guys can see. So I'm just doing that and letting it dry, and then I'll file it smooth. Alright, here it is. It's completely finished. I'm just kidding, it looks horrible right now. But that's what a file's for, so I'm just gonna hit the sides with the file because I did fill up the sides with super glue and baking soda to make it more even. And then these areas here, I'm gonna use a round file so those can actually be turned into fillets. There's rust on this file, just found that out. You can see it's turning into a fillet shape. And what's nice about super glue and baking soda is if you mess up, you just add more and you can just refile it. I am going to have to fill in there a little bit more, which I see now that I'm zoomed in on camera. So I'm just going to finish this up and show you guys what it looks like after. Alright, so I went over this piece with some files and sandpaper, so it's much more smooth than it was, and it also fits in the bottom of the magazine a lot better. So once the holes are drilled in there, it'll be secure in place, but I'm gonna drill the holes out last. So for now, I'm just gonna start working on the follower. So this is the template of the follower right here, and this is basically like the front view of it. And if you took this and turned it on its side like that, then you would see this view right here. So I'm going to use a piece of sheet metal to make the follower. I tried it with paper alone and it just wasn't strong enough. Like this back piece just bends in and out. It's kind of annoying. So this is a piece of the sheet metal that just wraps around boards and stuff, you know, the shipping process, and you just cut those bands off and then cut out shapes that you need. I already cut it to the right width, so I just used some metal shears for that, and it seemed to work pretty well. So basically, to do this, I'm going to use this view mostly. I'll use this one to get that cut right there, but it's just going to be a matter of taking this piece of sheet metal and matching it up with this drawing. Initially I just thought, okay, this will be pretty easy. I'll take the piece of sheet metal, I'll just line it up and bend this down and then bend this shape out. But you need to remember that this is going down and out. So it's the same length right there, but that's only because it's bent down. If this were straight, it would be somewhere out here. like that. So don't forget that, or else you'll mess up and probably be mad. So right now, I'm just taking my calipers and measuring the half distance of this, which I already figured out. I just took this width, divided it by 2, and I get the midline. So I'm just gonna lightly score it into the surface because pencil doesn't really stick to this. You can see it a little bit better when I have it facing the light more. So I'm just going to do that on both sides just so I have a reference line. And now I'm just taking a measurement of where the metal would bend first out to where it would be if this part was flat coming out. So just right there, and I'm going to transfer that line onto here as well. And now I'm just going to take these shears and cut through the midline up to that line I just marked on there. There's the cut down the middle right there. And now I can just line up with how far that cut goes in to where this piece bends down, and bend down this side so it's 90 degrees first, and then another 90 degrees that way. I have that side bent now, and now this whole thing is just a matter of checking and checking over and over until you get something that's pretty close. I'm just marking the next mark on here for where it bends again. Alright, so this took probably 15 minutes to get all the angles correct. So if I line it up here, all I need to do now is just trim off the excess there in the front, because you can see that's too long. So how I'm going to do that is not by using this view, because this corner right there where that bends down comes over here and ends up somewhere over here. For some reason it's not on the blueprint, like it doesn't show it in the top view, and it's way too easy to just put this on there and line it up to what you think is the back, but it's actually not, and then you cut your piece wrong. I'm going to use this view right here and just line up this bend with where it shows up on the template, and then make some marks to where I'm going to cut it. And this is actually a tiny bit long too, so it'll be pretty easy. Alright, so I trimmed off the excess and went over it with files and stuff just to get rid of the sharp edges. I rounded this area off back here too, so I can actually put this in the magazine as long as I make sure the back stays down like that, and push that up, and there it is. It looks like the top of a magazine. So the follower's finished, and now we just need to make a spring for the magazine. So if you're making a paper magazine, I recommend kind of a lighter spring, so it's not like super strong and pushing on the paper components really hard. So this is from a spiral of a notebook. I've seen several people do this. So I'm just going to reshape this to fit inside the magazine. Okay, so for this spring, it's not going to turn out like you think it will when you're making it, you know, unless you have like a mold or something that you wrap it around. But I'm not too worried about it because it's going to be on the inside of the magazine. It's not like people are going to be looking at it all the time. But I'm going to try to follow the blueprint as much as I can, see if I can get something that's pretty close and acceptable as far as a magazine spring goes. Yeah, this is going to take a little while. I probably have time to watch the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy and The Hobbit extended edition. The Sharpie seems to help. Yeah, well, basically I'm just going to keep doing that until it's 13 of these. So this should have enough. And when you're making this, just keep checking and make sure it fits. Alright, so I finished shaping the spring, and it's not perfect, but it does seem to work pretty well. So to test it out, I'm just going to put the follower in here and then make sure that that top portion of the spring is facing the same direction as the bottom of the follower. So like that, not like that, because it'll get stuck. So I'm just putting it together, and you can see the follower comes up to the top like it should, just like that. You can also take a round, in this case a snap cap, and put it in there. It does what it's supposed to. Take it out, the follower comes back up. Also, I forgot to mention, these feed lips were a little bit weak before, so what I did was just take some super glue and basically coat the top surface, also the inside, but I took some baking soda and sprinkled it over the outside and then just filed it down again, so it holds together a lot better. So now all I have to do is drill out these holes and these bottom ones too, so this base plate can stay in place, and after that it should be done. You can see I just drew these lines on here, and the intersection points are where I'm going to drill the holes. Normally I would just take a template and glue it on the side and then drill it like that, but this one layer would add additional thickness on both sides, which would make the whole thing have more friction. And I basically just drew these on there using the blueprint, so I just measured with calipers and put them in the right spot. And you can find the blueprints in the description, a link to the website I found them on, and I'll probably put them on my Google Drive too, just in case that link doesn't work. So I'm just taking the tip of my X-Acto knife and just making a little mark and twisting it like that, just to make it easier for the drill to start cutting into it. Unfortunately, I don't have my power drill with me, so I just have to twist it by hand. It's not a big deal though, because it's, you know, a very small amount of layers. Okay, so I'm just working my way up to a 5/32 drill, which is 0.156 in diameter. So I'm just going with a bigger one now. This isn't the final size yet. Yeah, that doesn't take long at all. It's kind of nice. Okay, and then the final one. This one's a little dull. And then I'm just gonna file this a little bit. I'm gonna try not to get rid of my lines completely yet, just in case. And I'll put super glue inside them at the end. Okay, so I have all the holes drilled now on both sides. So now I'm just gonna take some super glue and kind of cover these burrs. That way they don't just keep peeling off. They'll be a solid piece and just file right off. I'm doing a mixture of filing and taking the final size drill and just retwisting it through these holes. And it's kind of annoying because you have to file the inside too. So I'm just taking a needle file and just going over the holes on the inside. Alright, so I went over the whole thing with some sandpaper once again, some high grit sandpaper to make it as smooth as possible. So I've got the base plate, the spring, the follower, and these two pins that I cut to length for the base plate. And then of course the magazine shell. Let's just put it together now. Okay, well, looks like everything works properly and it feels good. It feels heavier than I thought it would, probably because the metal follower and the spring inside. Yeah, it's pretty satisfying. So I'm just going to see how it fits in here. a little tight, but I know with paper components, the more you use them, the smoother it becomes. And I'll just push the slide back. Yeah, there's the top of the follower right there. The feed lips go into those grooves like they're supposed to. And it rides over that, no problem. So everything with the magazine seems to be working pretty well. And since I don't have a strong enough recoil spring, I can't really load it into the chamber traditionally. I have to do that right now. So once I find a stronger recoil spring for the M1911 itself, I'll be sure to show you guys in some update videos. But this video is just specifically to show you how to make the magazine for the paper M1911. Because, like I said earlier in this video, if you can make this out of paper and get all the dimensions right, the entire gun will be so much easier to make because everything is basically based off of this shape. So that's all I got for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comment section below or in a personal message. And be sure to subscribe if you'd like to see all the latest updates, and I'll see you guys in the next video.